Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. With that, we move on to a very exciting session, something that I am looking forward to, which is the inaugural CEO panel titled Expectations of CEOs from the New Age CIOs. CIOs should not limit themselves to technical aspects of a firm alone, but should also contribute to marketing, finance, and any other areas where the CEO is responsible. Obviously, CIOs are striking a balance to stay up with the changing and demanding times while handling the conventional position of a technology leader. We have a power-packed panel with us today, and so without further ado, it's an honor and privilege for me to first welcome the members of this panel. We have H.K. Agarwal, Managing Director, Grasim, India. Jeyakumar, Janakaraj, Chief Executive Officer, AdaniConneX. And Seenivasan, Balasubramanian, Chief Executive Officer, International Aerospace Manufacturing Private Limited. This session will be moderated by Aravind Ramamoorthy, Partner and Leader, Value-Led ERP, PwC, India. Aravind, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. The rapid adoption of digital technologies is throwing new challenges to IT organizations and CIOs. As spending on cloud, mobile, analytics, and social technology soars, CIOs have the opportunity to help drive strategy, innovation, and revenue growth. Actually, digital transformation is impacting virtually every business. So there's urgency for IT or a CIO to be driver of innovation and change. We're really seeing how the role of CIO has shifted to become more embedded in the strategic leadership of the organization. So who best than these leaders in this panel who have been in the forefront of driving digital transformation in their respective enterprises to to share their wisdom and give their perspectives on this. Dear leaders, let me ask this question, and I want this to, I'll start this panel by asking this question to all of you. What is your vision of a new age CIO in this age of technology, innovation, and disruption to drive the digital transformation? There is something, let me kickstart this by asking this from all of you. Let me start this question first to Mr. Agarwal, followed by Mr. Jeyakumar, and then Seenivasan.
Thank you, Aravind. Good morning to all. It's a real pleasure and honor to be on this panel. So the topic is very relevant, and as we are all grappling with the digital transformation of our businesses, I think we are not alone. As per Gartner's report, almost more than 125,000 large-size organizations are starting the digital transformation of their businesses. So obviously, CIO has a very different role to play. In my thinking, the CIO has to be able to bring the digital in the center point, as a tool, as a platform to formulate the business strategy and plans how to achieve the business goals. It is no longer just doing the limited technology thing, providing the backbone or connectivity or hardware and ERPs or other things. It's becoming part of the business strategy development team, business plan development team. He needs to develop good general understanding of all aspects of the business. Like what is the value proposition of the business, how business model is for creating value for the business and for customers, what are the key processes, whether it is supply chain, finance, marketing, sales, conversion, and people aspect also. And so that he can then help the board, help the ExCom team to make a proper plan, which is centered around the digital way of doing business. Basically, he has to be able to first understand the dimensions and then be the architect of this change management. So this is the new role we expect the CIO to play. It's a very tall ask for them to change themselves in a short time for such a massive thing. not easy for them to develop so much understanding of all aspects of business, but this is what is definitely required.
Mr. Jeyakumar?
Thanks, Aravind, and thanks, Mr. Agarwal, for your insights. The way I see is that instead of starting with the expectation of CEOs on their CIOs, I'll start with the point that the businesses have evolved to a stage where technology has become integral to every operations, every part of our business. And therefore, the role is for the entire organization also to transform. And it is like how we started adopting safety, health, environment, sustainability, and all these aspects have grown in maturity in the organizations in various phases. And I think today we have come to a phase of our organizational transformations that technology and digital transformation is just part of our system. And if we don't adopt it and if we don't accept it as a management team entire, not just the CIO, first of all, is becoming a mute point right from day one. So I think it is the first is the acceptance that we need technology to transform ourselves. And as long as that comes in the executive committee or the top management team, the job of the CIO and the expectation from the CIO becomes a lot easier and more achievable. Because otherwise, it is going to be a horrendous task for that poor gentleman or woman to understand the business and to run the change management, because change management doesn't work, technology doesn't work. Okay. And it is all garbage in, garbage out after that. So I think the starting point for me is how does the company or the business accept this whole thing of change? The second thing is how do we see this function as an integral part to the business and not as a separate function which is to be run by a CIO. So the KPIs of every management team member, be it the CEO, be it the CFO, be it the operations officer, or even the safety officer, is all linked to the KRAs of the CIO. Because unless otherwise there is alignment in the objectives that the CIO wants to achieve, it is impossible for us to make a magician out of CIO. So that is the second important factor of change management that we have to drive from the top team, where we make the CIO an integral part of the management team and not just a service department. The last and the most important thing that we all have to understand is that digital technology is going to transform itself first in a very rapid pace. So it's not a static behavior that we need. We need a very dynamic behavior where we can adopt, where we can leapfrog. So we cannot be just followers of what others are doing in this one space. So it also needs the management team and the CIO to be quite external focused, which is never the case in earlier cases. In earlier cases, if somebody does an SAP implementation, somebody is going to say, okay, why can't we do it better? Or why can't we do this module in this standardized manner with no more customization? Games have changed today. The whole world has changed. The whole world is so fast in terms of enablement of IT or artificial intelligence. And so I think that external facing learning environment, and therefore we can leapfrog from a technology standpoint, I think is again a very important aspect. So that's my take, Aravind, from my side.
Thank you, JJ, because you made a point that it's not just the CIO, but even the organization has to change. That's an interesting perspective. Mr. Seenivasan, your thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Agarwal. Thanks, Jeyakumar. And it's a fantastic question. I mean, this is a very valid point of discussion today. I'll share you my experience from I work for Rolls-Royce taking care of this AMPL business. And in our industry, of course, in every industry today, in today's expectations from customers, the CIO's role has changed a lot. It's no more a standalone role. And over the last year, we have transformed from CIO to a chief digital officer. And today, what we call this position is a chief intelligent officer. CIO is no more a chief information officer. Because in everything, what is the expectation from our side? A CEO in the operations or the business to improve the profitability, to support the growth, or to improve the speed of the development, to improve the customer satisfaction. It is all possible only when we put some intelligence behind every action that's behind the not behind achieving the customer satisfaction in terms of delivery or quality, or in terms of development speed in the engineering area, or in terms of the communication what we have with all the stakeholders in the supply chain. That is possible only when we adopt the technology which analyzes and gives some intelligent results which makes us to improve further continuously. And that is what that is where we call the expectation from what I just tell as CIO, you are a chief intelligent officer. It's no more a CIO or a chief digital officer. Don't call yourself as a CIO, chief information or chief digital officer. And the expectations are very clear. And this CIO has to be connected with the expectations of the business, starting from understanding what the customer expects from us and how to be competitive in our business. He has to be an integral part of the strategy and passionate about achieving results in terms of providing the back end support, whatever is required for running the business effectively and efficiently. So there are success stories in our own businesses, what we have done using technology over the last few years in terms of adopting artificial intelligence tools to drive our zero defect improvements in our quality area. And of course, needless to say that it has got a big impact in driving the delivery improvements. And also in terms of in a VUCA world, like last 2 years, the pandemic has driven us to highest level of innovation. I should say that that is where we started using technology instead of to balance between the availability of people and supporting customers. There were times like people could not physically manage the situation, but instead we use technology to manage the situation in a better way. Probably today you are thinking that has forced us to think that why not we do this in something further better and provide a better satisfaction level to our business. So that is where we are today, and I will stop at this. And then CIOs are, for me, our expectation is they have to add intelligence to our business.
Thank you, Srinivas. That was a really interesting perspective. Mr. Agarwal, let me come to you with this question. You had touched upon this, but I would like you to expand on this. Beyond technology, what are some of the new leadership traits and key skills that the CEOs should focus on in this new digital age? Could be industry strategy, industry experience, strategic thinking, could be anything, but want to hear your perspective on what are the new leadership traits or new skills that they should focus on and develop. Mr. Agarwal?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
So as I said earlier, CIO in his new expectations from the board, from the senior people, has to develop a lot more understanding about the whole business. So he cannot remain only the expert or specialist in technology or IT or that side alone. He will have to develop. So there is a lot of scope for them to get into the different aspects of business. Then he will have to start understanding the pain points or the opportunities for improvement, where the business can become better, more competitive, more efficient, better quality, more safety, all these things. So unless he understands the different dimensions of different aspects of business, he will not be able to think on his own and then suggest the right solutions. He has to be strategic, he has to be courageous, he has to be collaborative, because he will be stepping on perhaps toes of some other people who might be protecting or feeling insecure with all these new things coming. He will have to display a lot of influencing skills. Even to the senior management team, he will have to convince them about the good schemes or the outcome. And above all, he will have to be very tactful and execution oriented and result oriented. Ultimately, at the end of the day, he has to own the outcomes. So these are some of the things which a new effective CEO will have to display or master.
Perfect. We are expecting somebody like
expecting a lot. Expecting a lot.
Let me come back to Jeyakumar. Mr. Agarwal spoke about the outcomes, and I have had the privilege of working with you and how passionate you are in driving the outcomes. So as a CEO, when you are reviewing IT transformation proposals or a budget, do you expect the business outcome to be tied to each initiative? What role do you envisage a CIO to play in tracking and maximizing the value produced by major technology investments, or an ROI on each of the investments, and committing to tangible outcomes, Mr. Jeyakumar?
Yeah. So Aravind, that's a fabulous point, because I think in every investment we want a return. The only aspect that we'll have to understand, first of all, as a CEO and as management team, is that every return is not directly in monetary terms when it comes to certain aspects of investment. And I think this is very important to understand. The technology transformation and the digital transformation age that we are in right now, there are certain directly tangible projects that every company will do, which will have business tangible results, which is going to be driven from the business side. It's not going to be a project that is initiated by the CEO. It's a project that is initiated by the business, because it is going to reduce their cost of poor quality. It is going to increase productivity. It is going to reduce waste. And literally, if you see what technology has done today, technology has democratized so many aspects of business in the value chain that the cost has just come down. And that is something was never ever imagined before. So if every technology investment was tied to a pure ROI based on our understanding today, we will miss out huge breakthrough opportunities of the future. So I think as a management team, the first thing we must understand is, where are we putting our strategic intent on digital transformation and investments, and where are we putting very direct deliverables of productivity improvements and certain other improvements that we are looking at, and what we can see in front of us and we are doing. So there's a very clear two buckets of investments in technology. One is where we see direct value today. The other is we are investing for our future survival of our business. So there is, when we do life insurance, there is no return on investment today. So I think we need to understand that we are talking about our life center here as the digital space, and we are not talking about our luxury here. So having a computer or having a system to operate your plant automation system, earlier there was always a debate. You want PLC, you want DCS. I've heard this argument 100 times when we all started our career. But I think today everybody is talking artificial intelligence as if we need that to run our home. So I think we have transformed even in our lives so much, and that I think return on investment is obviously a very important aspect, but I think it's not the only aspect at all. And I think every CEO, every business manager has to start realizing that. Having said that, the most important thing I think the CIOs have a role to play here is to expose the business to the availability of the array of technologies that are upcoming in the market, because I think that is a very important role to play, because otherwise the business team is always going by what has been already done and never thinking what is possible in the realms of technology. And that is a very important role, because that is going to change the return on investment in a very, very big way, rather than trying to go and find a vendor who is going to implement that tool, or a vendor who will supply the tool $2 cheaper and therefore have efficiency better. So I think there is a very big differentiator there in trying to identify what is available in the space of technology and solutioning the right technology, and therefore a lot of processes that we might be doing today are just not required tomorrow. So I think it is a very delicate part, because it will bring disruption in the management team itself. You might have one full department go redundant, right? So nobody will want to talk that, right? Everybody is very happy talking nice, sexy language as long as it is a language. But when it is going to come to my job, I surely don't want that, right? So I think that is an important role that the CIO has in terms of exposing the top management who have a long-term view of the organization in place, exposed to these technologies well ahead of the requirement. And that's a very, very important part of making the teams learn. Because unless otherwise we learn as business leaders or get exposed to as business leaders, we're never going to expect that to be implemented in our business. So that's my sort of points on this aspect, Aravind. Thank you.
Great thoughts, Jeyakumar. Let me come to you, Mr. Seenivasan, and let me talk to you about one of the important element in an organization, which is data. And we all know that data is the enterprise's most valuable and irreplaceable asset, and ability to utilize the data is becoming a key capability for every organization. So what role do you envisage the CIO to drive this data-driven culture? Because it's not a glamorous job, to put this in place, data governance and cleansing and quality. It's not glamorous, and it's very time-consuming also. So what role do you expect a CIO to play in ensuring this importance of data and data-driven culture so that the organizations can benefit from the good quality of data?
Thanks, Aravind. I must compliment you because this is a very important aspect of running business. Data, data is the backbone of our business. That is an irreplaceable asset, as you just rightly said. And it creates, it helps us once the data is properly analyzed and we put the right actions in place with intelligence behind it. It gives us a winning value proposition to make our business prosper. So that's what very, very important. Once the data is available, we expect. Here I want to bring another point. It is just not the CIO's responsibility alone. The data is well understood by the business heads in a better way, but they'll have to kind of collaborate with the CIOs and make CIO understand what is the expectation out of the data, what is available to us in front of us. And there are several examples today in our business where we have used data analytics to proactively identify kind of a risk in the business in our in several areas. Like it can be in quality, it can be a quality risk, or it can be a delivery risk, or it can be a development risk. So we were able to identify that proactively. And not only that, not identifying proactively is just not the important thing. What is that we are doing further with after identification? That's the most important thing. That's where the collaboration of the business leaders along with the CIOs is very, very important. Picking up this data analysis and identifying the signals of how an opportunity is available for the business to move the pace of the expectation faster. That is where the CIOs will come with the technology. They'll have to come with a solution. So if this is what is the signal, how do we use the signal to either eliminate the risk from the business or provide an opportunity to business to achieve the goal faster? So that is where there are to start simple examples like how the data is being used today in intelligent manufacturing. I use the word more and more the word intelligence because that is what matters to us finally. We are using the statistical process controls today. If there is a machine which is producing parts, hundreds of pieces, and there has to be we have an online statistical process control tool available, which tells us what is the kind of a sigma the quality levels are available coming to us. The parts are being produced. And we have also established certain rules, the upper and lower control limits within the tolerance band. And if the system is capable, there is an intelligence built. Like if there is something which is going out of spec, the system tells us like this is going to create some kind of a problem in the next to third stage or fourth stage based on the teaching that is already done to the system with the artificial intelligence tool. And what happens after that is very important. The system raises alarm saying that you better stop it, fix it, and then start. That alarm is given to the guy who is running, supervisor or shift engineer, telling him that there's something going, which is not stopped, which is not stopped, with advice is not being followed. The guys then gather together and then make the right decision to improve the process and avoid something which is going to go out of control. It's a simple example of what I told. And where the data where what we are using is like design parameters that need to be used in designing the parts right first time. And not only that, we have automated that in such a way that earlier if it used to take 8 weeks to 12 weeks to design certain processes, today it is done within 2 weeks. So that is the advantage what the data is giving to us today. Data per se is the most important thing, and analyzing the data is very, very important. and integrating the data to, after analyzing that, we know that proactive measures have to be taken. And something, there is always, I keep telling our guys, like knowing is different from doing. So knowing all these things is okay, but what are we doing about it? That is very, very important. So that is where we are just trying to automate some of the decision parameters using the latest technology and implementing that at the point of use. And that is where I just expect the CIOs to understand this passionately. They need to understand the business. It's not only the technology, how that can be used to, the signal can be used to provide an advantage to business. So that is where using data to provide advantage to business is very, very critical.
Great examples of power of data, Mr. Seenivasan. Thank you. Mr. Agarwal, let me come to you with a question. A seamless collaboration between technology and business is extremely important for a successful digital initiative. What do you expect from the CIOs to ensure that this collaboration happens? And how do you expect the CIOs to evangelize the power of technology to the various business leaders? For example, if there's a new technology that's come in, if they go to procurement and say, how do they evangelize? What role do you see the CIOs to play? So it's a two-part question. One is collaboration between business and technology. What role should the CIO play? And how should they evangelize the technology to improve adoption?
So here, as we have been talking, even Mr. Seenivasan just reinforced that point that CIO has to develop a very good understanding of the business, different aspects of business. A lot of anxiety, there will be a lot of apprehensions and skepticism. So first he has to have a plan and convince the people that whatever solutions are being worked out will definitely work, and develop a confidence in the business teams that this will deliver a better result, a better outcome. That confidence is very important. Otherwise, there will be a lot of issues on adoption and skepticism and the success of the solutions. He also will have to make people comfortable by training or whatever other means to use those things in the right way. Otherwise, the good solutions can also be ineffective if not used properly. So there is a fear also. People have a lot of unspoken sense of anxiety and fear. So he will have to help them overcome all these things. And people don't have to be really technology experts to use the technology. Like I don't have to be electrical engineer or inventor of electricity for using electricity in my day-to-day life. So these things he will have to plan properly. And then he has to have a robust plan of his own schemes, his own suggestions, so that he can convince, persuade, influence other people for investment decisions, whether procurement or even the board for approving the necessary budgets. So these are some of the things. He will have to be very tactful, because there will be people who will feel insecure. There may be people who will feel insecure because now their inefficiencies will get exposed. So there will be all kind of psychological forces working. So he needs to collaborate with HR, he needs to collaborate with senior people, every level, so that everything can work positively and successful outcome.
Thank you, Mr. Agarwal. Good piece of wisdom for the CIOs. Let me come to you, Mr. Janakaraj. Whether we like it or not, there are huge cost pressures. First, it was pandemic. Now it was the crude price, supply chain disruptions. There is this war going on. There is the toughest dual cost versus innovation or digital transformation, right? How do you see the mounting pressure of cost to cut cost across the board impacting the spend on digital transformation within the organization? And what's your advice or guidance to the technology leaders or CIOs in this? How do they balance it out? When they you touched upon this return on investment point, but given the current situation on the pressure on the cost, how do they convince the board or their management that digital disruption or digital initiatives are equally important, and how do they balance it out? And a related question in this is for the CIOs. There is always this thing about keeping the lights on or managing this versus this new initiative. So your advice or guidance to the CIOs and technology leaders would be useful, Jeyakumar.
Yeah. No, thanks, Aravind, for that question as well. The first point that I would like to make here is that high cost is not great innovation. High cost doesn't guarantee great innovation. Okay, let me put it that way, right? So innovation is going to be a cultural drive that the organization is going to drive. We have all come from a culture where when we wanted to buy a product, we will always ask, is this technology proven? We've come from that culture. Today, we live in a world where startups and unicorns are the name of the game. And I'm sure all these garages which grew these unicorns didn't have high cost as a fixed cost. Of course, they had high brain power, which got converted to equity value and things like that. But then they were not high spend innovations, right? And so the point I would like to say as a CIO or as a CEO, when you're looking at a digital transformation or an innovation expense or a cost, I think the first thing that we'll have to all understand and align towards is the business and the organization ready to drive this? And is it part of our strategic requirement to drive this? I think that is a more fundamental issue rather than trying to say that, no, I want to have this cost or I don't want to have this cost. If cloud adoption is absolutely right and center of the business imperative, then it is a strategy to be driven. Obviously, the best optimum cost structure needs to be found out as well. The only advice that I would have to the management team, including the CIOs, is not to just follow the wave, right? Everybody is going to cloud, so I'm also moving to cloud, right? So surely you're going to regret your decision at some point of time because you're going to see your costs go up and then you're going to optimize. So I think as long as the business strategy and the business need is mapped, not just for today, but also for the next 5-year horizon, because these investments, you cannot reverse them very quickly. So there will be a lot of fixed costs. There will be a lot of disruptions in operations if you are going to keep moving your digital transformation journey in terms of the concept. So I think that planning phase and sometimes we try to ignore the cost that we spend and the time that we spend on the planning phase. I think that is very important and to understand the array of products. The next thing that we all have to understand is that technology is going to ultimately give huge benefit, structural benefits in cost reduction. Like I'll give you an example which I came across very recently. Cost of lending, 50 rupees to a person, okay, is very high. And that is why banks don't lend 50 rupees to a person who can only borrow 50 rupees. Digital banking, which has been implemented in a developing country by a company, he told me cost of development is high, but his cost of lending is 0. So he lends 50 rupees to 50 million people. So it is a completely different ballgame. Cost is 0 to him. Every additional customer he adds, cost to him is 0. So he's ready to add a customer who borrows $1 a month. His NPA is 0 because the person who borrows $1 is very attentive to pay the dollar back because he's a very sincere guy. He just earns $1. Okay, he doesn't earn a crore and trying to keep an NPA with the bank, right? So I think this digital disruption of cost reduction is only achievable with digital transformation. It is just not achievable otherwise. So trying to sort of nuance this to say that no, whether we want to do digital or we don't want to do digital, I think is a zero-sum game. What digital technology to adopt which will comply and convert my business objectives to superlative results is the right discussion to have. And therefore, training the team, exposing the team, running change management upfront and not change management while implementing or after implementing technology, I think are more important tools for conversion. I would say the digital conversion of the management team is more important than the actual digital implementation of the tool because it's the management that will make it fail and not the tool that will fail. Because we hear horror stories, right, of digital transformations going wrong in large corporates, in large public sector companies, in India and in abroad. So there's no exception. Like I've heard of horror stories in Australia on health systems where companies have implemented and companies have been blacklisted who are tier 1 implementers. The reason is not just the tool or the people who implemented it. It is the whole ecosystem of management of leadership. So, and that is where the biggest chunk of cost is going to go, because leaders are expensive. Change management, if not done properly, re-implementation is just disastrous in terms of cost lost and opportunity lost is going to be much more. So I would always say that it's a business alignment, business goal, and business drive that's going to make the most returns for any technology investment.
Great thoughts, Jeyakumar. Don't do anything because others are doing it, but do if it is really relevant for you. Okay, so let me wrap it up by asking one final question, which is now the latest trend that is catching up in India, and I want the thought of all the panelists on this one. And there are no right or wrong answers to this. So there is this thought going on that we need to have a chief digital officer in addition to a CIO. And the thought is that two heads is better than one. The field of technology has become too diverse and fast changing. So maybe two roles is better than one. And what are your thoughts on this? Do you see these two roles converging? This is something that's catching up and a burning question in everybody's mind. So I'd request Seenivasan to come in first, followed by Mr. Agarwal, and then Mr. Jeyakumar on this.
Yeah, thanks, Aravind. Again, another relevant question to today's situation. There's always a kind of thought and discussion happening every now and then. So to just share with you, like, we are thinking about making it as one, of course, but one is going to be a subset of the other one, like the chief digital officer, or I call you the chief intelligence officer is something which we are trying to think, wherein the chief digital or the information, it's going to be a part of that. You know, having said that, I just want to know what we are propagating is like quality, like safety is everybody's business. I mean, it's like everyone's business in an organization. Similar to that, the digital aspects, everyone should think about what is the digital improvement. Every business head or every engineer or every employee in an organization should start thinking like, how can they adapt digital to improve the efficiency, and come with a thought process and then provide their input to the functional leaders who can sum it up and take it up with the CEO and CIO or the chief digital officer or the chief intelligence officer, so whatever it is, and drive it. So the bottom up approach is also required. It's just not the top down approach from the chief CIOs or whatever CDOs. It's very, very important. Having said that, another top down approach, what is required, the CEOs also should remember that they are also having the responsibility of digitizing the company. It's just not that has to be left to the chief digital officer or the chief intelligence officer. So it's a combination of, everybody should pick up this responsibility. And to answer to your question, yeah, it is going. So our preference is like, to make it as one, but ensure that, the message across the organizations is that it is not one individual's job, it is everybody's business, but we'll have to take advantage of this because it is just not a standalone function. It is, the digitization is going to provide a kind of USP to our business. I mean, that is going to create a compelling it's going to create a compelling advantage to our customers. That's the reason. There should be a reason why customers should be coming to you. That can be through digital. I mean, that there is no second thoughts on that today. So having said that, yeah, to answer to your question, yeah, our preference is to have it as one to avoid a kind of complications.
Thank you. Mr. Agarwal? Mr. Agarwal?
Yeah, thank you. I tend to agree with Mr. Seenivasan's view. And I would like to add on that as we expand the role of chief intelligence officer or chief digital officer or chief information officer, whatever name, the role is expanded in a very big way, very significant way. So now whether the existing person can transform himself first to take the new role, every organization will have to evaluate. So, of course, the organization of the chief intelligence, chief CIO itself will have to be changed. There has to be strengthened, there will be more verticals, and a lot of changes will happen in that vertical, that part of the organization first. So who is the right person? We need to bring the right competence. We need to bring the right skill sets. So existing skill sets are definitely not adequate. That there is no doubt or difference in that. So each organization has its own ecosystem. Each CEO has its own way of thinking. So there is no right or wrong answer on this thing. Whatever will work best is the right thing for that thing. But yes, the CEO has the responsibility to digitize the organization, as Mr. Seenivasan very rightly said. And whether we have one, we have two, we roll over. So organization has to be strengthened with the right skill sets. And whichever way it works for each organization is the right way. I will leave it at that, rather than prescribing any particular model for everyone. Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Jeyakumar, any different thoughts to make it more interesting?
No, the thought that I have is an extension. The job description has changed. The deliverables have changed. The landscape has changed, right? So reframing the designation as a chief digital officer is appropriate, right? Because the world has changed. The kids born are born on a digital age. So if you don't have a chief digital officer in your office, attracting new talent also is going to be a problem for you, correct? So I think we'll have to accept those norms of the, world in which we live, and therefore adopt new names. That's absolutely the transformation needed in an organization also. Whether you have one person or whether you have two persons parallel is again literally depending on skill sets, key deliverables, and what is the organizational priorities at the time. And every business is different. There is no way in the world we can standardize these things. The fundamental point here is that there is upskilling required in people first. Whether it is in the CIO or chief digital officer or innovation officer or whatever name we want to give him, the entire management team needs upskilling in terms of achieving this overall digital transformation goal. So I think that's the fundamental aspect that all of us have to realize, that all of us as CEOs, as leaders, need exposure. All of us as CEOs need immersion. All of us need to understand the world has changed already. Okay, if we had activism on digitization, I think we would do better, because I think with the activism we have done better on climate change. So I think it is just that. What is that activism we have within the organization, that there is that push and pull for digital transformation is going to make that human being more successful. So in my opinion, calling him chief digital officer suits the current ecosystem in which we are in. But it's very important to define the role, define the deliverables, identify the right skill sets that are needed for the people, and then support that individual in that whole ecosystem with training everybody, training including the CEO, because I will tell you, the bottleneck is always in the top of the bottle.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen, for these wonderful insights. I'm sure the audience would have gained a lot from this. To summarize, the expectation from, it's not just the CIO, but it's the CEOs who have to embrace the CIOs, and they play the role as a strategic partner rather than a technology leader. Thanks again for your wonderful insights.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed, the discussion. It was crisp. It was there was no holding back. A lot of things were said, and I'm sure this is great fodder for the new age CIOs, having this wonderful panel of MDs and CEOs here. I would like to thank each of our panelists for taking time off from their busy schedules and joining us at this summit. We wish you and your respective organizations the very best going forward. And Aravind, thank you for doing a fantastic job of moderating the inaugural CEO panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do stay tuned in, ladies and gentlemen. We will be back in a couple of minutes from now with the next session.